Welcome, good afternoon, and welcome to the Democracy and Racial Justice webinar, a conversation with Renee Montgomery. I'd like to personally thank every one of you who have signed on today, as we know that your time is precious, and we appreciate so much your willingness to donate some of your time to us. My name is Melvin Jones, and I'm a member of the Black Voter Impact Initiative, the sponsor of this webinar. In July of 2020, the Black Voter Impact Initiative was formed. And as our name indicates, our purpose was to have an expansive impact on Black voter participation in the upcoming election cycle, with a goal of increased civic and political engagement in precincts across the state of West Virginia. Dr. Shaniqua Smith led all of the field work around this effort. Dr. Smith will be on later to summarize the results of her work. Thank you again for joining our meeting today. The purpose for this webinar is twofold. Our first is we look forward to being informed and motivated by one of West Virginia's true heroes. Being a girl dad myself, I have followed Renee's career from afar for years. A true homegirl success story. We look forward to hearing from Renee directly. And secondly, the Black Voter Impact Initiative wants to increase the size of our tent. We're entering our planning phase, and our plans demand that we build local power and increase civic engagement in 2021 and beyond. Simply put, we're trying to capitalize on the enthusiasm and momentum that we have created in 2020. Our methods are simple. We identify those voting precincts across the state of West Virginia where turnout is low and where Black voter participation is also low. These are the places where we deploy our resources. Again, Dr. Smith will go into more details. If you're interested in joining our mission or helping us with other resources, that information will be coming later in the program. Now, once again, we'd like to thank you for tuning in. Thanking you for your time, and we're sure that at the end of this, you will think that this is time well spent. I'll turn it over to Dr. Michelle Foster, one of our hosts.
Good evening, everyone. It is great to see you all here on this cold February evening. Where else would you be? You know, this is the place to be this evening. It is just so wonderful to have you join us, and be sure to share on Facebook. We're going live. We're actually live on Facebook, African American Philanthropy and Action page. We're live on that page. So feel free to go out there and share our broadcast so that we can have others join in with us. But it is wonderful to see you all. I am here as a member of the Black Voter Impact Initiative and also the African American Philanthropy and Action Giving Circle, and also a member of the Link. So I'm here representing all the host organizations that have gathered today to host this conversation with Renee Montgomery. It is my pleasure to introduce our facilitators, and we need to make sure that I know that Renee will be joining us at about 6:15, and I don't see her in the lineup as yet, so we're gonna maybe go ahead and start putting your questions in the chat so that we can make sure that we have questions for Renee to answer, because she's going to be here answering questions, and our facilitators, our moderators are going to be chatting with her, and really bringing to light her experiences and all the great wisdom that she has garnered over the years, in her work in the social justice movement, and also as a WNBA player. So it is my pleasure today to introduce our moderators, Kitty Dooley and Charles Marshall. Kitty has been a practicing attorney for more than 29 years. She is the principal of the Dooley Law Firm in Charleston, where she concentrates her practice in plaintiff's personal injury, employment, and administrative law. In 2019, she led the group that successfully got the city of Charleston to name Court Street in honor of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Most recently, she worked with community leaders to remove the name of a Confederate general from a middle school in the city. As a former chair and current member of the Board of Commissioners for the Charleston Canal Housing Authority, Kitty spearheaded an over $90 million effort to rebuild the most depressed public housing in the city of Charleston, essentially changing the face of public housing in our city. So it's wonderful to have Kitty here with us today. Joining Kitty is Charles Marshall, Coach Charles Marshall. He is in his 5th season as the head women's basketball coach at West Virginia State University, our own HBCU. He joined State after spending 3 years as the head women's basketball coach at Glenville State College. Coach Marshall also served as an assistant coach at Berea College in Kentucky. During that season, his season there from 2004 to 2005, he helped Berea College accomplish a 20-win season, and at that time they broke multiple national NAIA records. So we have someone who is a coach and we have an attorney. What a powerful combination. So if we would have Kitty and Coach, if you can join us as we get ready for our conversation. I encourage you all to continue to put questions in the chat, and Kitty and Coach, they will present those questions to Renee.
All right, thank you so much, Dr. Foster and Coach. It's good to see you this evening. We know that basketball's been a little precarious so far this season, but we wish those Yellow Jackets all the best, and we're looking forward to having a consummate basketball player join us tonight. And with that, I'd like to introduce the person of the hour. So good evening to all of you, and thank you for joining us for this conversation with Renee Montgomery. All Renee Montgomery has done is to win. She's a champion, a 2-time West Virginia State basketball champion, an NCAA national champion, a 2-time WNBA champion. She is impressive, both on and off the court. Clearly, she did not heed the words of a political pundit who said athletes should shut up and dribble. She found her voice not just last year, but when her team, the Minnesota Lynx, were out front in demanding racial justice after the murders of Orlando Castile in Minnesota, where she was playing, and Austin Sterling in Louisiana. Her team declared that change starts with us and that Black lives indeed matter. Last summer, she announced that she would sit out the season following the murders of George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, and Breonna Taylor to work toward racial justice and actively supporting voting in Georgia. And that story of her choice to sit out has become part of the history of the 2020 election. And in her words, and this was before the election, if she was successful in her efforts, it would be like, I won a championship. And so we can chalk up yet another championship in her quiver. In 2020, she was named to the Bloomberg list of 50 of ones to watch. Time also included her in its 2021 next list of emerging leaders. Atlanta Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms said of her in the article for Time, in the spirit of all that is Congressman Lewis left us, she is an inspirational leader, part of a new generation embodying the conscience of our communities. She most recently announced her retirement from the WNBA after an inspired 11-year career. The Atlanta Dream head coach, Nikki Collins, said, her energy, enthusiasm, and leadership helped transform the Dream, along with her three-point shot. She prepared the right way and never cheated the game. It is the same work ethic and enthusiasm that will make her a success in everything that she does. As another young Black woman told us recently, there is always light if we're brave enough to see it, and if only we are brave enough to be it. Our guest is courageous enough to have seen it and is determined to be it. Ladies and gentlemen, our very special guest, West Virginia's own Renee Montgomery.
Hello, hello, hello.
Good evening, Ms. Montgomery. We are so happy that you were able to join us. I'm Kitty Dooley, and we also have the head coach for West Virginia State University, Coach Charles Marshall. We've already introduced you to our audience and told them that you're a champion, you're West Virginia's own. You've stood for the cause, not just in 2020, but well before that. And I'm going to turn it over to Coach Marshall, and he's going to start the questioning, and then it'll be back to me.
All righty. Thank you guys for having me. I apologize for being a little late trying to log in, but thank you guys for having me. I'm super excited to be here.
It's our pleasure, and we love technology, and it's great when it works, but when it doesn't, we improvise. All right, Coach.
All right. Well, first of all, how you doing, Renee?
I'm doing good.
It's an honor to be here and be able to have this conversation with you. But before we get going, I want to give a huge shout out to Miss Kitty for just an amazing introduction of you and what you are all about. Great job, Kitty. But you know, first of all, I want to first start off by saying to you, don't be mad at me because I didn't recruit you. I was still a rookie at the time. But
no problem.
If I was at West Virginia State at the time when you was coming out of high school, you would have definitely been the first offer. But no, just know whenever you're in town, you always have an open invitation to come out and speak to my team, and it would be awesome for them to hear from someone of your stature that is a winner, which is where we're trying to take this program to. And we're getting there, but it's always good to have
No,
people
for
that
sure.
have.
You know, I have a lot of ties there with my snook, which is my mom. Renee Montgomery taught there. My sister Nashay went there. My dad went there. So yeah, I got a lot of ties there. I'll be back for sure.
Good, good. Well, I'm definitely going to hold you to that. You please shoot me an email, look me up, give me a call. We'll make it happen. But no, first question for you. Again, thank you for being here. But you know, with the things that you stand for, you're a leader in this social justice reform. You took an amazingly bold step to put your pro career on hold to bring awareness to injustice. What do you want young people to take away from your decision?
Oh yeah, I want young people to take away the fact that you can do things from just wherever you're at. So, you know, everyone thinks that to make an impression or to be an activist, you need to have this huge platform and this huge following and a lot of different things going on. You don't. You know, I started to talk about this saying moments equal momentum because it just takes one moment. It takes the want to. We all have social media. We all have Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. So many ways to get out what you want to say. It doesn't matter your following. You can Google, you can search on those different platforms, whatever topic you're passionate about. Are you passionate about women advancement? Well, then you can search that in Twitter. There's going to be other people talking about it. There's no topic that's not being talked about. And so I want young kids to know that if you want to have an impact, you can do that. You don't need anyone else. You don't need you don't need anything but yourself and the want to.
Awesome, awesome.
Well, I think that's great that you're letting our young folks know that they don't need anyone's permission to make a stand. And in the introduction, I talked about a comment that you made prior to the election when you said that you were sitting down essentially for racial justice, social justice, and to get people actively involved in voting. And the comment that you made was that you would have different teammates. And if we were successful, then that would be like winning a championship. And so you did it. Along with thousands of others in Georgia, you had this great victory. And now that we're past the election, what steps are you taking to hold those elected officials accountable to see the policy changes that you believe will take us more toward eliminating systemic and institutionalized racism?
No, I'm glad you asked that because it's a marathon and I talk about that as well. And voting is just step one. And a lot of people, you know, getting people to step one was a task because a lot of people don't believe in politics. They say it's not for them. And just getting people to understand whether you like politics or you're interested in politics, politics is interested in you. And I've been fortunate to work with people like a Stacey Abrams. They have Civics for Culture. And what that means is a lot of people think that politics or politicians are supposed to look a certain way, be a certain person, but anyone can be a politician. And now you see, there's never been a time where people can name mayors and name just different politicians in different positions. But because of what's happening, because of the Senate runoffs that we're here in Georgia, a lot of people are interested in what's going on in their communities. And so you have people like a mayor here, and shouts to Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms, because I mean, I'm proud of my mayor here in Atlanta. And the reason I say it is because your mayors, they create your city budgets. And so one quick way that you can figure out what's going on in my community is check on those type of people, the mayors. That's who creates the budget. Where are the money going? Where's the money going to? Is there money going to community? Check on who's on the ticket. You know, like if there's something going on in your community as far as policing is concerned, well, then the sheriff, you vote on that. You know, these are things you vote on. So I try to inform people on where they can check in on what's wrong. And a lot of people don't feel like they want to be into politics because they don't feel like politics will change, that it's just set in stone. It's really not. And so the next steps is teaching people that the people that are in office right now, if there's something you don't like, well, there's numbers you can call, there's places you can go. They hold different meetings that you can actually view and look. So I think I would say the answer, this is a long way to answer, but the answer to your question is telling people how to check in on these different politicians and these different people they voted on. A lot of times they don't even know where to look. So phase 2 would be letting them know how to tap into these different things and where to look to go about causing change.
Thank you.
That's awesome. Renee, now,
What's up?
what's up? Now, you're talking about, affecting change, making change, and how can we get the young college athlete to also see that vision and understand the importance of voting as well?
You can't force it on people. And with voting, I mean, you have to kind of funnel people, but that question was asked to me a lot. I've talked to a lot of universities, and I don't think that social activism is something that you force onto someone. I feel like it's something that you want to do when the time is right. And I think with maturity comes the understanding that, yeah, this is something that will affect you. Also, a lot of athletes and even myself before 2020, a lot of athletes are worried about speaking out because of how it could affect your sponsorship, how could it affect different relationships in your life. And so I think one of the first things you have to do is let an athlete know that if they do speak out about certain causes, that there won't be any repercussions for speaking out, that there won't be any backlash or conflict because they spoke out. I think that that's a real concern. And so I know that like you being the coach may be like, yeah, it's okay to do this, but they might be concerned about, well, how will the school think of it and how will people handle it? So I think that there's a lot that goes into that. And of course, I want athletes to feel empowered and feel like their voice matters. LeBron James and his team, they instilled that in me when I opted out. When I opted out, I felt it was a scary moment because I didn't know how anyone was going to react. I didn't know if I was going to have a place back in the WNBA. I didn't know how my teammates were going to feel. I just didn't know what was going to happen. And that alone, that unknowing is very scary. And so for athletes, I think it's more so about instilling in them that it's okay for them to have a voice. It's okay for you to have an opinion. A lot of times it was that shut up and dribble. That was the culture for all athletics, all sports. No one cared what we thought about politics. No one cared what we thought about anything other than sports. But, 2020 changed a lot. 2020 changed everything. And now people are starting to realize that, athletes, we are very equipped to talk about a lot of different things, especially WNBA players. We played overseas. We've been submerged in different cultures. Most of us are four-year school graduates. So we have bachelors. We've been educated. And so athletes have to feel empowered. For a long time since I've been playing, it hasn't been an empowerment movement for athletes. It's been do your stuff, go to school, get your grades good, go to practice, work hard, and that's it. And now athletes need to understand that, no, that's not it. You do have an opinion. How you feel matters. Even going into mental health, that used to be a stigma in sports, but now people understand how athletes feel matters. And so it's just about continuing to embody and empower them.
Thank you.
All right. And Renee, is it okay if I call you Renee? We call you that anyway. But
you should call me Renee.
But the comment that you made about athletes standing up and speaking out, we've seen in the not too distant past how Colin Kaepernick was ostracized and lost his job in the NFL for quietly protesting the treatment of African American people by police and the system in this country. And I had mentioned that shut up and dribble comment a little while ago, that you didn't do that, despite the fact that some pundits were saying that. And so I guess my question to you is, you're from West Virginia. We want to love and embrace you. But where did you find that courage within yourself to make the stand that you made in 2020? Because despite the fact that folks are standing up, there are still those who would push it back against that and who would ostracize and try to hurt professional athletes who make a positive stance against racism?
No, that's a great question. You know, let's even rewind. You brought up Colin Kaepernick, and in 2016 was the year, in fall of 2016, that's the first time Colin Kaepernick took a knee. And in the summer before that, the summer of 2016, I was on a Minnesota Lynx team. And, you know, there was a lot of turmoil, civil unrest going on in Minnesota because of Philando Castile had gotten murdered by the police. And so us being the Minnesota WNBA team, we felt like we needed to make a statement. So we wore shirts, and the shirt said, "Change starts with us." And we understood that it was going to be a little bit controversial because it had never been done before. So we even put police shields on the back of our shirts just to show that we're not opposing to police, we're opposing bad policing. And for whatever reason, you know, there's a quote that says, racism is so ingrained in America that when you're opposing racism, people think you're opposing America. And that was very true for us at the Minnesota Lynx, because after we wore those shirts, the police officers that our security for our games, they walked out. They said they're no longer policing our WNBA game, like a full league sanctioned game. We had no security there. They just left. The WNBA fined us for wearing those shirts. We got lots of hate mail, to say the least. We got a lot of letters. And then we even got letters from just concerned fans who were torn. They were telling us, you know, well, you know, I don't want to choose between you all and my brother who's in the military, or you all and my cousin who's a police officer. And we were trying to tell people, we're not asking you to choose. You know, we were telling people, like, we're just not okay with bad policing. We're not okay with innocent Black people being killed. And we were trying to say all the things that we're not okay with, but it was perceived, because it was so, you know, it was different then. It was before even Colin Kaepernick took a knee. It was such a different concept for people that they just felt that we were opposing everything American, and it just did not go over well. And so then when you fast forward to 2020, I had already been through that experience, and even a week or 2 weeks before I opted out, I was on, there was a very call that became infamous, and they called it the Kyrie call, but an NBA player named Kyrie Irving, he had held a call with all the other NBA players, and basically he was asking them, what are we going to do this 2020 season, guys? Like, there's a lot going on in the community. We all know that we want to have an impact, so what is that going to be? And there were a lot of ideas getting thrown out there, and I was like so impressed. I was impressed with all these influential men on this call trying to figure out the best way to create change. And one of the options was, should we play this NBA season? That was brought up by one of the NBA players, Kyrie. And after the call, you know, there was a lot of discussion about it, and people that aren't in locker rooms may not understand it, but discussions can sound like arguments to people that aren't used to the locker room setting. So in the locker room, you have a lot of alphas and alpha males. And so when people are talking, it can seem aggressive when it's really just not that serious. But long story short, the call was leaked, and the media found out that it was being proposed that the NBA players not play in the 2020 season. And man, people were just not feeling it. People talked very badly about Kyrie Irving. They called him crazy. They said this is the dumbest idea ever. And meanwhile, this is about a week before I was about to opt out. So it was tough. You know, I talked to my parents a lot. I talked to, you know, my family, my fiance. I talked to everyone that it was going to affect. I even called my head coach of the Atlanta Dream, and just, I talked to everyone that my decision would affect, because I felt like if I told people how I feel, then they have to understand it. And how I felt was that, how can I go play basketball right now when I'm definitely not going to be all in? And so for me, one of the things I prided myself in is being prepared, being all in, being ready all the time. And so I couldn't see myself in the bubble. I wanted to be here in Atlanta, boots on the ground. I wanted to see, you know, I talked to older people, older generation who had been here before, and they said that, you know, what's happening right now, and this was when it was 2020, they were saying that what was happening at that time was nothing like they've ever seen before. It wasn't like the past civil rights movements. It wasn't like anything they've ever seen. They thought it was better. They thought it was bigger. They thought that real change could come from it. So I was just thinking, like, I got to be a part of this. And so my confidence came from just feeling like I was going to be on the right side of history. I felt like if I opt out, what can I do? Or if I play, what are the pros? What are the cons? And I just felt like there was an overwhelming gravitation pull towards opting out because I wanted to be here. And then it was crazy enough that, Atlanta's the mecca of everything. And then after the November 3rd election happened, we had a Senate runoff, and it was here. It was Atlanta. It was 2 U.S. senators, and it felt like I was in the right place. And it felt like that was confirmation that like I needed to be here, because that Senate runoff, it just so happened that Senator Warnock was running against my team owner, Kelly Lefler, and the WNBA had taken a stance. And before the WNBA had taken a stance, Senator Warnock was polling at a 9%, like single digit polling. And the WNBA took notice of that. And I want people to understand too, the WNBA just didn't get mad about my owner. And I don't know if people know, but my owner, Kelly Lefler, wrote a letter opposing the Black Lives Matter movement, said that we should keep politics out of sports. And so the WNBA players, as well as myself, vetted Senator Warnock, used people like a Stacey Abrams, people that have been there, that understand it. And we found out what he was running for, and then we backed him. And that was different. I went from never being in the political space to being like right in the thick of things. And it taught me a lot. A lot of people try to say the WNBA is so small and no one cares about the WNBA. We didn't get a lot of national attention before that, but as history told it, Senator Warnock went on to win and now holds a seat in the U.S. Senate. And a lot of people will agree that the WNBA had a lot to do with that. So what gave me my strength, my courage was just, first of all, my family, my relationship with God, and then just knowing that I'm doing the right thing. Like sometimes when you're doing the right thing, it might seem like everything else is crazy, but you just have to trust that when you're doing the right thing, even if it is scary, you got to just take that leap of faith and do it anyway.
Well, I see you sent a text where I guess this was an open tweet to Senator Lefler and said you wanted to have a conversation with her. And it's interesting how when you want to speak to people about their views, did she ever respond?
She did not. And, a lot of people think that I only sent the letter out. I sent the letter out because I had already sent the text that didn't get answered. So a lot of people were really feeling some type of way. I was getting a lot of backlash on Twitter, like, well, why would you tweet this out? Or why would you bring this to social media? And if you really wanted to talk to her, you would have texted her. I did. I just didn't feel the need to tell everybody everything I did. So I had reached out via text. I sent a letter, just trying to touch base, because at the end of the day, that is our team owner. So for her to be a bold move, it was very interesting. And I just wanted to know, like, where was that coming from?
Well, let me just read a little bit of it so people understand the context. This is Dear ex-Senator Lefler, former senator. I'm pretty sad to see that my team ownership is not supportive of the movement and all that it stands for. And that's the Black Lives Movement and everything that was going on. And so I think that was fairly courageous to stand up to an owner and say, look, let's talk about these issues so that you have a better understanding of where we're coming from. And she chose not to respond. And of course, now she's has an X in front of her senatorial title. Coach, you have some more questions?
I do.
And I just want to hit on that real quick, because a lot of like my whole thought process and all of this, I've been playing sports my whole life. So my first thing is to just, let's talk it out. Like I'm one of those people that we can agree to disagree. Like I have no problem agreeing to disagree. A lot of times I think people have a problem with that. If you don't agree with somebody's viewpoint, people automatically just write you off, don't want anything to do with you. I wasn't even going to do that. My letter goes on to say, like, we should probably be locking arm in arms, because when we're talking about empowerment, we need women empowerment right now. Just the future is female. We got our first VP that's a woman. So I'm thinking that we got a lot of momentum as women. And so a woman should not be breaking down another women's league. And so I just wanted to, I think that there's ways to go about things, but yeah, it didn't work out how I wanted it to, but I was trying to set the tone for, if people don't agree on something, you don't have to send hate mail. You don't have to go at somebody crazy. You can just talk it out.
Thank you for that.
Well, I'm going to shift gears a little bit. I am a father of 3 daughters, so I'm a girl dad, and that's not also counting the ladies that I coach over the years. But as a father of 3 daughters that live here in West Virginia, how do you think the West Virginia public schools can do a better job of educating and improve the lack of African American studies in the education program here?
I don't think it's just West Virginia. I mean, I think that people that live in Connecticut are saying the same things. I think people live in Atlanta have definitely said the same thing to me. I think that African American studies needs to be intertwined with American history. So I think that the problem really is, why are they 2 separate categories? I think that our history is American history. And so when we have history class, it should all just be encompassing everything that happened in American history. And I think that this is getting talked about a lot now, to the point where, you know, we have Black History Month and you learn about all things slavery, basically. You don't necessarily learn about Black excellence during Black History Month, or the things, the inventions and all the amazing things that people have done. You kind of learn about things like slavery and how we overcame it, but it's still an impressive story. And so I think a lot of, I mean, it's our history books. It needs to be updated. And I think that it was written, our history books was written from one perspective and one viewpoint. And I think that history has a lot of different viewpoints. So that's something that, I mean, I know that there's many organizations trying to tackle, just trying to figure out how can we update the history books. I mean, it's time. And I think as history, I mean, we can all agree that 2020 is a historic year in so many different aspects. And so many different things about 2020 should be taught in schools. And so when are we going to update that? You know, when will be the time to put what happened in American history in 2020 in the history books? And so if they do include that, hopefully we take a step back and start to look at American history and how it doesn't include Black history as much as it should. So, I mean, I think that that's something that not just West Virginia, but just our school books, it needs to be taught differently.
Thank you.
We had a question, and some folks gave us questions ahead of time, so that it may be a little disjointed, but because of your growing up, you know, your formative years in West Virginia, and now you've been part of WNBA for 11 years, but as you mentioned, you played basketball and traveled the world over. So you really have a perch that is unique. And so based on everything that you've had an opportunity to do and see, I mean, what lessons do you bring back, or can you give to West Virginians around community engagement and how we can be effective given the limitations and numbers that we have here, and that our voices may not be as prominent as, say, Renee Montgomery's, as we try to make systemic change?
Oh, that's a good question. And, you know, I played all over. I played in Russia for 4 years, and now with everything going on, it seems kind of crazy, but there's so many different things that I've learned from Europe. And I say Europe because, you know, West Virginia, I mean, not West Virginia, I have to say America, we're really spoiled in a sense of the technology that we have, washer, dryer, just our normal amenities that we have in America. It's very different. And then when you go overseas, the lifestyle is a lot slower. They take time to sit down every day and eat dinner and eat together, and it's a whole different lifestyle. And so what I take from that is it doesn't matter, that it's kind of like what I said about moments equal momentum. It doesn't matter how big the numbers are. It just matters the want to, you know, like if you're consistent, and and the reason I say that is because, like, if you're consistently building and growing, yeah, you might have started small. Maybe people didn't hear your voice in the beginning, but how long did you stay with it? You know, were you doing it for 4 years, 5 years? Like, were you guys constantly staying with it? And I say it in the sense of things, it takes time for things to happen. You have to build it up. It's not going to be instantly, like it's for me, I've been playing in the WNBA, and this is kind of crazy. I've been playing in the WNBA for 11 years. And I've had a voice and opinion, like I said, in 2016, we even wore shirts. But the moment that I opted out, that's when people started hearing my voice. Like I've always had opinions. If you ask people ask my coach, Coach Cheryl Reed from Minnesota, is she surprised about what I'm doing? And she was like, no, like, have you met Renee? And so the point is, for a long time, I've been trying to go about things, doing it the right way, talking to people, treating people the way that I felt people should be treated, giving my opinion about things that, I felt like could change or be for the better. But when I opted out, 11 years later, when I opted out, that's when my voice started to be heard. So I would just say, consistency. Like, you just have to keep building. And I know it may be discouraging if your voice is not necessarily being heard right away, but I just think consistency always kills. And so if you just stay with it, and the more you do it, the more you'll have people joining in. And we talk about West Virginia maybe not being as big as the other places, but we're on the map. Like we're it's not necessarily quiet anymore. I mean, we got a Randy Moss repping West Virginia hard. You got me repping West Virginia hard. Like, people understand that it doesn't matter where you are anymore. Like, as a community, as a Black and brown community, people get it. They don't care if you try to team up with somebody in Atlanta. They're not gonna be like, oh man, they're from West Virginia. No way. Team up. Reach out to other organizations. Like, there's other people doing what you're probably trying to do. And so I would always just say there's strength in numbers. Just stay consistent and just try to link up with other organizations.
Well, I think that's important. First, you talk about expecting gratification. And for those of us who are a little older, we recognize that because it has taken time. The younger generation kind of has an instant gratification thing going. And the other important thing is coalition building. Not necessarily going it alone, but putting like-minded people together so that you can move toward the goal. I'll defer to Coach, and then I'll have some more questions.
Renee, I'm going to definitely piggyback off of you and just say you definitely are one of the main ones that has put West Virginia on the map, especially Charleston, West Virginia. When I walk around and just, work with some of the people that's been in office, man, they had conversations about you still to this day that I wouldn't even have even known of. So you're definitely someone that a lot of people here in West Virginia definitely still look up to. Mm-hmm. But as for what would you wish your 15-year-old self knew that could have prepared you for what you're going through right now?
Sure. If I was talking to my 15-year-old self, I would probably be stressing out over getting a scholarship. But my 15-year-old self, I would just say, be confident. A lot of times when you're younger, you doubt yourself. You doubt if you can do it, if people are going to like you. You doubt like the outside perception of you. So what I would tell my 15-year-old self is everybody's wondering the same thing. Are they going to like me? Do they like this? Is this cool? Is this not? So I would say just be confident because everybody's thinking the same thing you are. Everybody's just as insecure that age as you are. At 15, you're not the most confident person in the world. You're still figuring yourself out. So I would tell my 15-year-old self to just trust it. A lot of times we've all like that little feeling that you get inside, whether you're doing something right or whether you're doing something wrong, trust it because that's your intuition. And even when I was 15, I can remember moments where my intuition was talking to me and I wasn't trusting it. And so now I trusted it. That's the difference between the 15-year-old me and now fast forward to 2020 where I was really scared that the world was going to shun me for opting out because I know they don't like that idea, but I did it anyway. I just trusted it and I just trusted myself and my gut. And so at 15, you got that little feeling in there, so follow it.
And I asked that question for the simple fact, with a lot of mental awareness and stuff, the things that we're going through with COVID, this kids been homeschooled right now, it's a lot that they're dealing with. And, I just wanted to get your...
No, to that point, and I've never dealt, and this is something that, I can't imagine like COVID shutting down a whole season. And even I just think back to my senior year at UConn. Well, if I didn't get that senior year at UConn, and that's the year we went undefeated, and that's the year I got a championship, and that propelled me into the draft. I mean, I don't know what I would have done, but what I know is that everyone's going through the same thing you're going through. And I know that doesn't make it any better, but that means that like you might feel like you're getting behind or that other people are getting ahead, but we're all going through it. You know, we're all dealing with a different lifestyle. We're all dealing with being remote. We're all dealing with a certain level of isolation. And so I can imagine that that's not fun, that's scary. And I'm so glad that mental health and mental awareness is a thing now, because it really just, it wasn't something that we talked about, definitely not in sports. It wasn't something we talked about in school. It just was not typically something that we talked about. And now it's being talked about. So one thing I would say is that if you are feeling really low, if you're feeling lower than you think you should be, talk to somebody. There's no shame in it anymore. There's no stigma. If you're feeling lonely, reach out to people. You know, if you're feeling like you don't have any energy because that's a sign of depression, talk to people. It's not, there's not that stigma anymore of, oh, you're not, oh, is she crazy? No, that's not a thing anymore. Mental health is just as important as your regular health. And it's okay to feel sad. You know, it's okay to feel not comfortable with what's going on. We don't know what's going on, you know, so I just want kids to know now that stigma is gone. And so take care of your mental health. Self-care is so important.
Thank you.
Okay, that's great advice. Coach mentioning COVID and what folks are dealing with. I think it was interesting that you came up with remember the third and moments to momentum. Because someone asked the question about what strategies were successful in Georgia as it related to voter registration, inspiring folks to get out and vote, and all of those efforts. So I know you kind of worked with everything else that was going on, but you had your own initiatives to move people past the idea of voting to actually getting them into the ballot booth.
Yeah, I did. And so the thought process behind that was, so I opted out the day before Juneteenth. And I did that intentionally because I was about to throw a Juneteenth pop-up block party down here in the Centennial Olympic Park, because that's where all the protesters were every day. So every day the protesters were there for like 9 hours a day. And I thought that that was wild in a sense of it's hot here in Atlanta. And this was in the summer, like the dead heat of the summer. So I really started out, and just to point with like to the moments equal momentum, I really started out just giving out waters. Like I was giving out waters to the protesters because I'm like, look, I don't know a lot, but I know that when you're hot and you're tired, you need to hydrate. And so I started out giving waters, and then it turned into like, I'm like, yo, I'm going to throw a party. And so I just brought out like cookout food. I brought hamburgers, hot dogs, and just started handing out meals. And it grew into something else. But then I was thinking, man, it's only June, and we got to keep this passion all the way till November. And I started to get like a little worried about that because, as we know, the news cycle and our attention span just as a people is short. You know, it's a quick, short attention span. So I just started thinking of like, well, how can we keep this energy? Like, we got to keep this energy all the way through. And so I thought, well, let's get a campaign going that says, remember the 3rd of November. And it rhymed and it was catchy. And so it started to catch on. And so as I was out there, and this is only June, July, and I'm out there talking to people, and I'm like, hey, but listen, we got to take the passion to the polls, okay? Because we got to remember the 3rd of November, right? And I just started saying it a lot. And then it turned into a campaign along with, you know, Chris, and I partnered with a guy named Chris, and he was amazing. And we just started to do a whole campaign where we educated people, because I started to realize the more I talk to people, the more that like people just aren't familiar with how the system works. And so just telling people about, yes, you can vote, you can do it absentee ballot. You don't have to miss a full day of work if you don't want to. There's options. And yes, our lines are super long here in Georgia, but hey, listen, was more than a vote. We partnered up, and now we opened up State Farm Arena. Get in and out quick. Like just trying to do different things to let people understand that, you know, not voting is not an option. And I just think, again, I always just found comfort in partnering up with people that were already doing it, people that were familiar with it. So that's how I got partnered up with Stacey Abrams' team, with LeBron James's More Than a Vote team, I just started to reach out to people that were already doing it and saying, hey, look, this is what I'm trying to do. You know, how can I help you on what you're trying to do, and how can you help me on what I'm trying to do? And it just turned into something really big. And more than a vote, I mean, opened up State Farm Arena, Mercedes-Benz Arena, multiple arenas in the NBA, USC, it just had a domino effect, and it was crazy to be a part of like something that big. And I just started by handing out waters, and that's how moments equal momentum. That's how it became a thing.
You know, as you think about that, though, particularly in the South and in some cities where there are larger African American populations, there's less opportunity for early voting. There are long lines, and I heard you say that people were partying in line, and they were making it a party as they moved along. But those are intentional efforts to suppress our voting. And we saw that before the election, the primary, the general, your special election, and then following the votes, we saw an effort to disenfranchise the votes of people of color. And so we know that we're dealing with these systemic issues. And so how do you think we should, moving forward, continue to deal with those efforts that are probably really upset that people like you have stepped up to encourage folks to vote? Because one strategy.
You hit them where it hurts, and that's what we did in Georgia. You know, Georgia, there were so many different things that happened in Georgia where some people were waiting in line over 7 hours, 9 hours. That shouldn't happen. You know, like we all know that shouldn't happen, but what you do is you remain consistent. And I keep saying that because we were persistent here in Georgia. If we allowed all the roadblocks that were put there for us to not win and for us to fail, if we allowed that to work, it would have. But what you do is you become stubborn. So now that we can all see it, now it's like out there for everyone to see. You can see that even after the election, now there's different rules trying to be made about mail-in voting now because we voted in such large numbers. But how you combat that is you stay in line. You make sure you vote. And I say that because it sounds simple, but that's all we did here in Georgia. We were just stubborn. You know, there were long lines, 9 hours, 7 hours, all over. But the people were dancing, like you talked about, people were dancing in line. Imagine that. Imagine you thinking that you're suppressing a vote and you're going to have people in line and you think that they're going to leave the line. But then you go look at the news and there's a lot of Atlantans dancing and they're partying and they brought music, they brought food. Like, how do you think that made them feel? And so for me, that was the best part because there were so many different efforts, even with me, myself, there were just so many different things that were trying to stop the momentum, but people were still dancing amongst the chaos and people were still enjoying it. I'm throwing a pop-up block party. We're bringing food, we're bringing drinks, we're wearing masks, we're doing it safely. And then, so what can you say about that? You know, how can you try to suppress that? We're going to just stand here. And then they tried to close the doors and said the time was up. People stood in line. They waited until they got the call in that says, no, you got to open the doors back up. But it's just about being consistent and persistent. And that's literally all we did here in Georgia. We just stayed with it. You know, we were annoying. I know people were so tired of hearing me talk about it. I was tired of talking about it, but I kept talking about it. You know, I thought we were going to be done November 3rd. And then I'm like, oh my goodness, we got to go all the way to January 15th for this runoff. But we did it. Like, we kept talking about it.
Okay, well, it certainly worked. All right, Coach has another question, and then
I was going to say, do we want to go to the question and answer session?
Yeah, we have several questions from folks who've been watching you, and Coach, you want to take the first one, and then I'm going to be looking down at my phone to try to put some others together. But we appreciate folks who came out and to hear from you, and we want to try to get to some of those questions.
Yes, most definitely. Yeah, I'll definitely take the first one, Kitty. And I'm gonna kind of be picky with mine. I recognize the name. She's actually one of my former players who's on here with us now that played at State. Her name is Amia Summers. But her question is, while you were out with protesters and educating about voting and voter registration, how did you include or have success with keeping unity within that space?
Keeping what?
Unity within that space.
Oh yeah, I mean that's just what that's my thing, you know, and I credit sports to that. You know, for sports, I've been used to being the captain of my team. Typically, your point guards are your leaders because they have to talk the most. And so I literally just used all the skill sets that I learned in sports, and I carried them over to here. Like I started to build a team. You know, I built a team around me of people. Like I had a manager. You know, I used my mom, my sister, my fiance. I used everything I could that was around me, and I started to build and grow. And then I started to reach out for help. And in that same aspect, like I said earlier, I didn't just reach out for help and say, hey, can you help me? I reached out and said, hey, what can I do for you? And then also, you know, I have some things that I would love if you could help me with. And so then it's not a one-way street. Both people are benefiting, and then it feels like a unity. So I use literally sport. I talk about it all the time. My foundation was built on it. The mission statement of my foundation, it's called the Renee Montgomery Foundation. Got real creative with the name, but the things that we talk about on my foundation is teaching people the skill sets I learned in sports: discipline, teamwork, confidence, unity. Those are all things that like they're instilled in me now because I've been playing sports my whole life. But if you take those same qualities and you put them into your day-to-day work life or anything else you're doing, they're a tremendous skill set. They're highly sought after. And so I just started doing that with everything I'm building, even with building a podcast out and doing different business endeavors. I always just use those aspects that I learned in sports.
Coach.
Yeah, it's on you, Kitty.
All right, thank you for that. I've seen some notes in the chat. I don't know if you can see those, Renee, but a lot of people giving you shouts out and
Yes.
you know, talking about your courage and the work that you've done, not just this past year, but the work that you put in to make West Virginia proud for so many years. So I just wanted you to be aware of that. And then here's a question. It says, while you were out with the protesters and educating folks about voting and voting registration, how did you include or have success with keeping unity within that space? And I think this is going to the issue of there may have been counter protesters there. And then there's also a lot of people bring a lot of their baggage, you know, to the party. And so if you ran into anything like that, how did you deal with that?
Yeah, so definitely there were, obviously when you're going to protest, there's going to be people that, I said this a lot, like a lot of the things that we were doing last year, it almost seemed like no-brainers. Like, of course we need to be progressive with not even just the Black and brown community, but with women and advancement of that. But then you got to remember that some people like the way it is right now. You know, like we're talking about change and we want things to change and we need things to change. But then you got to think about the people that are like, no, I like America just how it is. And you saw what happened on January 6th, you know, whenever people were not happy with everything that was going on. And so the reason I say that is because while I was out there with the protesters, you know, I got labeled a mob leader. You know, they started using terms like mob mentality, and we were peacefully protesting, just literally just marching and they were chanting, and I was giving out waters, but that was labeled a mob. That was put on the news as detrimental. And so what, you know, the way that I combated that was I posted, and again, going back to social media, the beauty of social media is you can tell your side of the story. So if I'm going to be a mob leader and they're going to call me a mob leader, well, I want everybody to see what is being considered a mob. And we had kids stepping, you know, there was a step team and I had kids stepping, and we had a song performance by artist here, Serena Grace. And we had the food being handed out by young kids, older generation. We had a lot going on. And so I just put it out there like, does this look like a mob to you? You know, and so the way that I kept the unity, the way that I kept everybody intact was, we know we're not doing anything bad. We know that we're not the problem. We know that we want progressive change. And so I kept reminding people what the goal was. What's the end goal? Because if you start getting caught up with people calling you mob mentality. That's not why we're here. We're here because we need change. And we're here because we don't like what we're seeing in the news. We don't like seeing George Floyd murdered, Breonna Taylor murdered. I'm here in Atlanta. Ahmaud Arbery was hunted and killed. We don't like what we're seeing. And that's the point. So you can call us a mob, you can call us whatever you want, but we're just out here protesting. And actually, we're having a good time. And so that's kind of how I kept the unity. I kept it while I was there. I always wanted it to be fun and lighthearted and enjoyable, because you can create change and you can have fun while doing it. And so for me, I always try to have like an entertaining element about it. And so I just put it out there like, if this is a mob, then okay, we're a mob, but this is all we're doing. We're having fun.
Here's another one, Renee, from the audience. This is from Upward Bound.
Hey, my sister was in Upward Bound.
Okay. And the question is, as many professional athletes have chosen to use their platform through symbolic gestures of social activism, like wearing social justice t-shirts, taking a knee after the 2020 social justice summer, do you think it's appropriate at the collegiate level, high school level, midget leagues? So many student athletes are afraid to lose scholarships and their playing time in retaliation.
Yeah, so this is what I'll say about that. If you're already in college, it's tough because you've already done it. But now, if you are junior high, if you are high school, I think that that's something that you should factor in when you're deciding where you want to go to school. You know, like now that you are very aware of who you are, what you want to do, what you might want to wear. If it is going to be conflicting to your university, then maybe that's not the university for you. I say that because like I went to UConn, and just seeing how UConn, Coach Ariema, the whole coaching staff, the school, just seeing their response before it was cool. Because, you know, there was a moment there in the beginning where athletes were just like, we're going to talk about it and we don't care how you feel. And some schools were not cool with it. Some, like, there was still that unknown. It was still the shut up and dribble phase. And UConn, before it was cool, they came out and was like, oh yeah, our student athletes are going to be able to say whatever they want. And for me, that was like a great moment, because like none of these situations came about while I was at UConn, but I chose UConn because of the people that were there. And then to see how they responded to times like this. I mean, Coach Ariema, he's went on record, many interviews talking about he's all the way with it. And so for me, it makes me more proud to have went to UConn, because yeah, they get it. And so if you are an athlete, student athlete that's thinking about going to a school, well, you even see now some bigger name athletes, top 15 athletes going to HBCUs. Why do you think that's happening now? They realize that, I want to be somewhere that I want to make sure that I can have my voice heard, and I want to make sure that the university is going to be supporting me. So they're going to HBCUs, and I love it. You know, like, and if you want to go to a big D1 school, I love it too. But the point is, just know where you're going. You know, now you have the choice. And if it's midget, if it's bitty ball, or if it's junior high, okay, that's one thing. You know, that's something for you and your parents to decide. But when you're in the high school phase and you're going to different AUs and thinking about different universities and colleges, that's something that you should seriously consider factoring in. That's a question you're allowed to ask coaches questions. That's a fair question to ask.
I definitely agree.
We don't want to burden your time too much, so we're going to wrap up here. And one of the things that I wanted to ask you before we have to let you go is, how has basketball changed you, and how have you changed basketball?
The second part is tough, but I mean, basketball has changed me. It's made me confident. You know, and I was actually kind of shy, if I think about it, in a sense of, you know, I just like to go with the flow. And basketball has changed me in a sense of, it made me a woman, obviously, in a sense of I had to learn, I had to grow up. I was young, making decisions like, all right, should I go hang out with my friends or should I work out? So basketball taught me how to be disciplined, and taught me how to weigh my options, and taught me how to prioritize. Basketball also taught me how to express myself. You know, in sports, you have to learn how to talk to people, but you have to talk to them how they need to be talked to and how they won't be offended. And you have to make sure that you massage this person's ego and talk to this person a certain way and pump this person up another way. And so basketball taught me how to communicate. And I think communication is like one of the strongest skill sets you can have. If you can talk to different people from different walks of life, if you can go into any room and have a conversation and feel comfortable with anyone. I mean, I played overseas for 10 years. So I was living in Russia for 6 months at a time, 4 years in a row. I was living in Israel. I lived in Australia, Latvia, Lithuania, France. I lived in all those places. I didn't know the language, you know, so I had to figure it out. And basketball brought me there. You know, basketball cultured me. And so I would say basketball made me who I am today because I don't know who I would do without it. I started playing at 5, and I've been playing ever since I retired just now, you know, so basketball taught me how to be confidently me. You know, I know that who I am on the inside is who I always would have been, but basketball allowed me to be confident and stand up and be proud of who I am. Even just being Black from West Virginia, you know, like first question everybody asks me, there's Black people in West Virginia? I'm like, yes, there's a lot of us. What are you talking about? But that's the first, you know, people in the beginning, that could have been awkward for me. Like, yeah, there's Black people. Oh gosh, you know, like I could have been uncomfortable about it. But now I'm like, what are you talking about? There's Black people. Have you ever heard of Randy Moss? And I got my whole family there. And yes, it's lit. We got an HBCUs. And now I say it differently. And that's just confidence. That's just confidence that comes along with being bold. You know, in sports, you have to be bold. And how I changed basketball, man, that story is still being written, but I hope to have brought a positivity to sports. You know, one thing that I always did, I don't care what team I was on, who I was playing for, everyone knew that I was going to be on time and everyone knew that I was going to be positive and have a good attitude. Like it didn't matter. You can ask any of my coaches, you can ask any of my teammates. I took pride in that because those are things I can control. You know, I'm 5'6". I list myself as 5'7" because you can measure without shoes on. So I list myself as 5'7", but that's not very tall for sports. You know, that's not coach knows like 5'6" is just not knocking people's minds with your height and my athletic ability. So I always made sure I control the things that I can control. So I don't know if I changed basketball, but I gave basketball everything I had.
Well, I love your response that that story is still being written in terms of how you will change basketball. And I know whatever you do, that will still be a large part of what you do and what you bring to the WNBA. And when I introduced you, I said, there is always light if only we're brave enough to see it. If only we are brave enough to be it. And you remember that from the inaugural. And I said that our guest is courageous enough to see it and determined enough to be it. And you have certainly told our audience or shown our audience that you are. And we want to thank you so much for always repping West Virginia and giving us just a bit of your time this evening. It's been a pleasure. Thank you for joining us. And Coach.
Guys, let me thank you guys real quick because, you know, shouts to my mom, Samantha Booker. She's on the call, but she told me about this. I was like, what? Yes, in the sense of like, I always, you know, a lot of the stuff that I've done and the success that I've had has been away from West Virginia just because, you know, we don't have any pro teams there. So when I went off to school, a lot of my success is not here, but I love to be able to reconnect back with West Virginia because, like, as you mentioned, I rep West Virginia hard. Like, you know, New York people think I'm crazy because I rep it like I'm from New York. You know, New York people will tell you every 2 seconds they're from New York. But I tell you every 2 seconds I'm from West Virginia because to me, that's not easy to make it out of West Virginia and do things. And so I just proud to be from West Virginia. And I've still got close ties. I go back every year, but yeah, I thank you guys for having me.
Well, and one of those times when you come back, I know family time is important to you, but we have some youngsters around here at Mary C. Snow and what is now Westside Middle School who need to see you. They need to meet you.
Women's basketball.
They need to understand that you have done some of the things that they would like to do and understand your journey. So we'll reconnect, but this has been wonderful and we appreciate your time.
I just want to say one final thing. Again, continue to be a champion like you are. I'm not from West Virginia, but this is my home now. And I'm proud that I had this opportunity to be on this conversation with you. And thank you again, and continue to do great things.
No, thank you. Keep leading them, and I will say this, coaches matter. I've had some amazing coaches throughout my career that have been influential in my career and in me as a person. So yeah, that matters. So keep influencing. I mean, it's amazing that you have your players on this call. There weren't calls like this before when I was a player. So love what you guys are doing.
Thank you so much, Renee. Yeah, and thank you for being so responsive, because I was the one who reached out to your mom and connected me to your manager. So thank you. Yeah. So
that's not spot. It's like if she asks me to do anything, it's like done. Like I'm like that type. Like yeah. I'm a mama's girl, daddy girl, all of it.
Yeah, we certainly appreciate you, and since you said that you want to be more engaged, trust we will be calling upon you again. So thank you so much for joining us today and for being so candid and just off the cuff, and being so wise beyond your years. We really, really appreciate you. And Kitty and Coach, you guys made a wonderful moderation team. We appreciate you as well. And thank you so much for showing up. And thanks to everyone else for being here. We have a couple of things to get to before we sign off. We've got Shaniqua, Dr. Shaniqua Smith. Shaniqua led the efforts to really mobilize and to get the Black Voter Impact Initiative going. And she's going to give you some updates on how things went and just what all we have going on and what we have planned. So, Dr. Smith?
Good evening, everyone. The West Virginia Black Voters Impact Initiative, which I refer to for VVII going forward, its purpose is to increase the political engagement of people of color through educating, collaborating, and creating strategies that will produce opportunities for people of color to build political power. We started our efforts last in September 2020. After reviewing the election results from 2016, we realized in West Virginia had a 37% of people voting. And communities of color, the voting polls was down to about 20 to 30%. And so what we did is we looked at communities that had high population of African Americans and low voters turnout. And we talked to organizers within those communities to get them going to increase the vote, and also with education. The counties that we picked were Kanawha, Mongalia, and Mercer counties. And we also built a strong partnership with Pastor Lyles, who was up in Martinsburg and Berkeley with their Get Out the Vote initiatives. Throughout the efforts, we had 10 paid organizers who were recruited and trained. They were trained on relational organizing, which was at the heart of our efforts. And we also coupled these efforts with some digital tools that we had, like Empower app, which helped us reach out tools with people that we knew. We did get out the votes that include registering individuals to vote. We did caravans, we did drive-in movies, and most importantly, we partnered with community members and organizations and supported community events like National Night, Get Out the Crime, and also Halloween events, and also partnering with individuals that had like homeless shelters and food services, and wherever the people were, that's where we actually went to get them to actually to vote. A lot of our efforts were focused in low-income communities, housing complexes, and most of all, we did a lot of work with Young West Virginia, who we did a lot of partnering with and a lot of programming with. Throughout the project, we gave out over 10,000 voter guides statewide that provided information on where to vote, how to vote, and voters' rights. We gave out over 5,000 masks and hand sanitizers. And most of all, we was able to provide many warm meals as we learned and partnered with community members as we educated them and encouraged them to vote. The impacts that we had thus far is that BVII brought together a statewide of community Black leaders with the identity and accomplishment to lead a nonpartisan voter outreach effort. We partnership and we coordinated with different organizations, voting organizations, and we now have affiliation with 14 nonprofit organizations that support voter engagement. We gave community members the chance to be in their community and to organize among their families and their friends, and also for them to get knowledge, political knowledge about what is going on. And most importantly, I think that came out of this project is that we was able to raise the voices to address an infrastructure problem of a bridge in Mercer County that was closed for over a year to the African American community. Through our organizing and bringing efforts, the bridge now is getting some attention and being fixed. And we also in 2020 have increased the general election, which had the most election activity in West Virginia history. And lastly, we started a Facebook page, which we are now using to promote political information. It's legislative season now, so please go and visit and like Black Voters Impact Initiative Facebook page, where we will keep you updated on what's going on in the legislative season. One of the biggest lessons that we learned is that we can't wait for it's time to vote to get with our people. We must start educating each other and teaching each other about political power locally, not only nationally, start having politics as a common conversation within our communities, and start supporting events that's year-round to build political power. And lastly, I would like to say that the Black Voters Impact Initiative is partnering with the Deltas from Charleston-Institute Alumni Chapter to host on next Tuesday, February 23rd, Deltas Building Democracy. I put the link in the chat for you to register, and we're partnering to actually create this platform to start bringing knowledge and awareness to how we can all become more politically active. Thank you.
All righty. Thank you, Dr. Smith. So we've got just one other item on the agenda, but I've been posting in the chat ways that you can support Dr. Smith and her team of organizers in their work, in their organizing work. If you would like to contribute to the Black Voter Impact Initiative, please go to tgkvf.org/give. This information is in the chat. And under donor information, you would select whatever amount you'd like to give, and then select the African American Philanthropy and Action Fund in the drop-down menu. And just let it, type in there under other information, BVII. BVII is working with the Giving Circle, African American Philanthropy and Action, to really host this event and to continue to grow these types of events in our area. So we really need your support to make it happen. And the AAPA fund is established at Greater Kanawha Valley Foundation. That's why we're directing you there to give to it and to support the effort. So thank you so much, Dr. Smith, and all of the organizers who've done such a wonderful job this year as we launched this very vital initiative. We now have a young West Virginian who led the Young West Virginia Vote Together initiative, Takaya Smith, and she is going to join us now.
Hello, hi. I appreciate the time and space. My name is Takaya Smith, and I am the Youth and Racial Justice Organizer at Our Future, West Virginia, and Young West Virginia, a Black and youth-led movement working to create changes in the systems that impact our daily lives. I especially appreciate Ms. Renee's words of encouragement to our young people. It is incredibly energizing to have someone who looks like them and come from where they come from to speak to the importance of being politically involved. This past election, we worked with Black student groups across the state at West Virginia Wesleyan, Fairmont University, UC, Concord, and West Virginia State to ensure that young people got out to the polls. Their efforts included 101 trainings in civic education, peer-ran voter registration drives, and rides to the polls and early information. These young people understand that that true societal transformation requires civic participation. Their work did not stop on election day. They've compiled a list of best practices and voter reforms for colleges to adopt and are currently organizing on their campuses to make these reforms sustainable. If you would like to know more about these reforms or expand these efforts in your own communities, feel free to reach out to me at takaya@ourfuturewv.org. I appreciate all of the power spoken tonight, and I appreciate the time.
Thank you so much, Takaya. We appreciate you for reaching out and for all the great work that you're doing to lead our young people. So keep up the great work. That's it, everyone. Thank you so much. We'll send a follow-up email to everyone just to kind of share some highlights and share a link to this, to the recording for this program today. Thank you everyone for showing up. It was wonderful having you. This is the first effort to really get the Black Voter Impact Initiative out to the community. So we really appreciate your support, and we really appreciate your presence. Just a reminder, if you'd like to support this effort, tgkvf.org/give, and then select the African American Philanthropy in Action Fund. Thanks everyone, and thank you to our committee members for their diligent work in planning this effort. Thanks so much and have a great evening.